Obesity in a black church. Let's talk about it. What's going on, everybody? This is Dr. Chris Featherstone here for yet another episode of ViZion United Podcast. So, listen, man, this is something that's been actually a very interesting topic for a while now that has been uncovered. It's not really haven't been talked about for a long time. Interestingly enough, over the past 10 years, there's actually been few studies, and a lot of them are still developing studies about obesity in the church. And I had a conversation throughout the past few years about obesity in the church and the lack of heavy emphasis of physical fitness and physical health, mental health even, but specifically physical health. We'll get to mental health for another time. That's a whole different topic in and of itself. And it's something that I've discussed before and we'll continue to discuss, the importance of mental health in the church. And not only mental health, though, physical health. I think physical health is something that is also overlooked within the church. There's also a lot of studies that have been developing over the past few years that talks about the correlation with obesity in the church. And so I got a few articles for us to just talk about here. Here's one of them. So the first one is from Dr. Keisha Bentley Edwards, and she's a professor at Duke University, Associate Director of Research and Director of the Health Equity Working Group at the Cook Center, and Assistant Professor of General Internal Medicine. She says this: both men and women who are active members of their churches are being pulled in a lot of directions outside of their faith community, which can make self-care a lower priority than what it is warranted. We want them to make faith and health priorities in their lives rather than faith or health. It should be both and. It shouldn't be either or. Same thing with mental health. So check this out. Data was used from the National Survey of American Life. The authors of the report studied the intertwining faith, behaviors, and health outcomes for more than 4,300 African American and Afro-Caribbean Christians. The authors found that black men who attended services nearly every day, the shortest interval tracked, were roughly 3 times as likely to be obese than those never attending or attending less than once a year. Very, very interesting here. So here's the thing as far as obesity spreading. Through social networks. For those frequenting the church, the authors write the space may facilitate the transfer of obesity through shared social norms. And that's actually another thing that's been going on as far as proximity. And there's other, here's another one here. When it comes to choosing surroundings and community, and the unfortunate part that a lot of churches, a lot of black churches especially, they offer very unhealthy foods when it comes to a lot of gatherings, and doesn't at the same time there's less of an emphasis of mental health and the importance of mental health when eating these foods. If you want to choose these foods, be sure that you want to work out. Be sure that this isn't a normal thing. It's important for these things to be taught instead of just giving out plates upon plates upon plates. I know that a lot of times in the black church, especially from my experience, you cook the most greasiest, cheesiest things going on a plate. And you have that comfort food. You fellowship. You kind of do a pot blessing type of deal, and you go and you eat just foods that are not healthy. Now, here's the thing. I'm not that guy I'm big into fitness and health, but I'm not that guy that says, restrict eating such and such. I'm not that person. I still eat, all different types of stuff. I track my eating, and that's very, very important, but I'm really, really big into fitness. And I think it's really, really important to give people that type of education. If you want to feed them all that type of food or really promote that type of food and gatherings within the Black church, I think it's really, really important to spend a lot of time with fitness groups, with fitness classes, with fitness training, even small group sessions that talks about fitness. All those things are very, very important in the church. Here's another article based on some researchers at Northwestern University Feinberg School of Medicine. The researchers acknowledge that there are many potential explanations for the association between religious participation and obesity. One may simply be that religious gatherings often may center around eating traditional high-calorie comfort foods, said Matthew Feinstein, the study's lead investigator and a fourth-year student at Northwestern University Feinberg School of Medicine. Or perhaps young adults with a propensity toward weight problems find more acceptance and less judgment in church groups. Maybe religious faith gives some sort of physiological high similar to physical exercise, but without the burn off of the calories. Or maybe, as Purdue University sociologist Ken Ferraro has suggested with his previous work, churches are a feeding ground for gluttony and obesity. And speaking of Dr. Ken Ferraro from Purdue, he says this: most religions also encourage restraint from participating in injurious behaviors such as heavy drinking and smoking. However, overeating is not considered a great sin. It has become the accepted vice. Many religious activities are rooted in food, from the donut hour after weekly services to receptions or picnics. These foods tend to be high in fat. These high-fat meals are saying implicitly, this is how we celebrate. Instead, religious leaders need to model and encourage physical health as an important part of a person's spiritual well-being. And that's really, really important to really implement things like that, because again, that balance is so key and so important. And from a psychological overlap when it comes to obesity in the church, and we saw those articles, those scholarly input there from the doctors. And so I think it's important to really emphasize the importance of obesity in the church. For so long, the churches, especially the Black church, has been taught, to not really focus on the importance of mental health. And there's a lot of overlap. There's developing studies to show the overlap between the low socioeconomic status when it comes to the psychological correlation to obesity, particularly in the church. And so there's a lot of unfortunate demographics and communities with not as much of a high socioeconomic status, but a lower. There's a lot of psychological correlation, unfortunately, when it comes to taking one's feelings and addressing one's mental health when it comes to food. From a higher socioeconomic status, there's still obesity levels, but those those studies correlate more to boredom than to psychological kind of overlap when it comes to why people consume or overconsume or abuse food. So I think it's really, really important for us to realize the importance and the correlation. It is a thing, ladies and gentlemen. It is a thing. There is a correlation between food and obesity, particularly in the church, and a lack of seeking mental health and unfortunately burying one's feelings in food. Unfortunately, we see this a lot with obese pastors in Black church. I mean, just very, very obese pastors. And it's really easy to hide under that, especially from a pastoral standpoint, because of the community, because of the outings and gatherings with a lot of unhealthy foods, as well as the lack of accountability when it comes to that leadership. You have a lot of pastors, being revered, and you're not having people be accountable for them and tell them, hey, look, we gotta get some things together with them when it comes to this weight, and we need to really change this lifestyle and have a better emphasis and a greater emphasis to physical fitness. And yes, absolutely, it's important to stay in prayer and stay in reading our word. Those are essentials. I mean, even there's all types of psychological and theological studies that talks about greater mental health comes with a higher prayer life, with a bigger prayer life, and reading scripture and things like that. That is just a given. But I think it is also important, and in addition to that, it's also important not to overlook one's feelings at the expense of bearing it in food. And we see a lot of overlap when it comes to that. Specifically within the Black church, and specifically all across the board. But based on studies, Black men are more prone to show overwhelming obesity rates in the church than any other demographic and ethnicity. So Black males are the ones with very, very high obese rates, comparatively speaking. The Black culture period has an obesity rate between 12 and 15% higher than the average obesity rate. Usually about 3 to 4 in 10 people are obese. Unfortunately, when it comes to the Black culture, between 4 and 6 people are obese. So it's just an overwhelming percentage, and unfortunately, it's a staggering percentage difference in obesity. So those things are really, really important to really focus on, and we can't overlook that, church. We just really can't get to the point where we're overlooking those things. And we see a lot of obese people in the church. I mean, there's personal conditions and things like that. That's usually the exception to the general observation. And the general observation is that there's a lot of people who aren't really concentrating on physical fitness when it comes to the church. And unfortunately, there's a lot of church leadership that aren't making that a priority within their church. And I encourage you, I implore you, I challenge you, church leadership, to make that a really big, important thing in your community. I'm actually one of the moderators and one of the spearheads behind a group called Theology Geek Fitness with my brother, Dr. Jonathan Pritchett, and a couple other colleagues. And we spend a lot of time, we develop a group on Facebook. Go check it out, Theology Geek Fitness. And we post workouts, we post pictures and all different really cool tools and equipment and things like that. Really cool tools to really help you as the theology geek, as the person who loves the Lord and loves studying theology, but also has a high priority of fitness. So check it out. I'm a certified personal trainer myself, so I'm all for asking me questions. I have a testimony of myself of losing a substantial amount of pounds that I gained because of multiple back surgeries, and keeping myself accountable and being in good shape, and maintaining good shape. So glory to God for all that. That stuff is very, very, very essentially important, and I encourage you to make it a priority in your life. We don't want to lose you. We don't want to lose you sooner than you're supposed to go. Okay? Take care of yourself. All right? Your family, your friends, they will appreciate it if you do. God bless you. Peace.